Hello everyone, it is Joe here from Omnipoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCGO codes, including the stuff from Fusion Strike, make sure you go ahead and check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your order using that code Omnipoke. For today's video, we're going to be looking at another interesting archetype made possible by the new inclusions from Brilliant Stars. This is going to be breathing fresh life into a Durant Mill archetype. This is a massive throwback for me. There was a previous Devour deck in Durant going way back into the early black and white era. And yeah, it may be possible now to reinvent the wheel with this deck and bring it back into this format. So let's look at why this deck is now possible, because of course the Durant itself is already in the format. What's changed from this new set coming out, Brilliant Stars, that allows us to try this Devour strategy much more reasonably? And to be honest, it's because of Double Turbo Energy. Double Turbo Energy turns our outs of one attachment to fulfill the Devour attack into having 8 outs now. You have the 4 Twin and the 4 Double Turbo. Previously, you'd have to have the 4 Twin Energy as well as random things like EXP Share and like Grass Energies, or like Raihan and Basic Energies as well. All of these things were kind of awkward and made it very difficult for you to chain Devour every single turn. Now we have these 8 energy cards. I think it should be much more reasonable for us to perform a Devour attack every single turn of the game. That is the ideal strategy for Durant, because of course we are not looking to deal damage here at all. We are simply looking to run our opponent out of cards remaining in their deck as the alternate win condition, rather than taking those prize cards. The other thing that's super important, of course, is Manaphy coming out from this set. It allows us to have our bench protected, so we literally only give up 1 prize per turn. So realistically, we have 6 turns to win the game and hope that Devour gets us there. But more often than not, you're going to need more than 6 turns, right? Because 6 times 4 is not 60 cards, and it's not going to get you there. So we are going to try and extend the game with some disruption. Most of the time, it's going to be in the form of trying to trap chunky Pokemon, but also it's going to be trying to use Crushing Hammers and Yell Horns to slow down the game. So let's have a look at the deck list. And it really is simplified, mostly because, of course, our board is going to be full of Durants. You want all 4 of them to be in play at all times, so you're getting the maximum amount of devoured cards. So really your board spaces are going to be probably 2 Cinccino in the majority of matchups, and in spread matchups you have that Manaphy to protect you, which is really nice. The make-dos are a welcome sight for certain. It is going to help us draw throughout the game when we are using some unconventional supporters. We have lots of boss's orders. We're going to try and trap things and force people to, you know, spend attachments from their hand, dig into their deck so that they draw into switch outs, that sort of thing, because we are going to be combining boss's orders with Galar Mine. So the idea here is that not only are we proactively milling our opponent, they're also having to draw deeper into their own deck just to hit some of these outs so they can continue to attack you. That's really where Durant becomes a scary prospect, where if they can't attack for a turn, that's just a free 4 cards off the top. That can sometimes even mill, you know, some of their outs to get back into their active position. So the Cinccino definitely going to be helpful for us cycling for our deck. We have easy discard fodder from like the extra VIP passes, the extra Glorias, the extra level balls. All of these are giving us explosive turn 1 plays where we go wide on Durant as quickly as possible, but they are easy fodder for make do in the latter turns. And hopefully means that we can, you know, always have a rescue carrier in hand, dig towards our next energy attachment whilst still playing the likes of boss's orders. We're playing Bird Keepers in a really high count here as well. That's because we are playing Galar Mine as well as Yellhorn. So what we're going to try and do is promote a non-Durant, or one of your Durants potentially even, and then just Bird Keeper into another one after a Yellhorn. So you're not flipping the coin, but your opponent is, if they do not move out of their active position. And again, it's a huge headache for the opponents. We've got that Echoing Horn as well. Naturally, we are milling cards from the top of our opponent's deck. Many decks can easily hit 90 damage a turn, which is our maximum hit points in the deck, with just like a lone attacker just announcing their attack every single turn. But if we devour a basic Pokemon, we can Echoing Horn that into play to then become a Galar Mine boss's orders target for us. So that's going to be very important. Pokegears help cherry pick some of these supporters, which is going to be nice. Peonia, of course, is a really important supporter to play here, so that we can try and access any Durants that enter the prize cards, because we have no other way of accessing these cards, as we will not be taking any prizes or dealing any damage, so that's going to be very important there. And what else to say really about the deck? It's all like a ton of ball search. The level balls gets everything in the deck. The VIP passes are essential for going wide early. The rescue carriers are essential for getting back your Durants every single turn. Do not feel bad about just getting back one Durant with these rescue carriers. It means that also your excess Cinccino line is going to be really good make-do fodder as well, where you get the Durant that just got knocked out plus like a spare Minccino, make-do away the Minccino straight away to continue churning through the deck. Rescue carrier is like essential to this strategy. Crushing hammers again. Yes, sometimes you can get like a couple of heads and you just completely wipe the opponent's board of energy in those opening stages, which is a huge win for you. But even if you just make them play like a Marnie or like a research to dig for attachment for turn, that's again a huge win. So that's kind of the idea here. Curse Shovel, they can go onto your Durants pretty happily, and you just force the opponent to, again, like dig for boss's orders if they do not want to play into the shovel. You could go even heavier on the shovel, but I do still like all the cards that we're playing in the list right now, so I don't really see much space, so that's why we're on the count of 2, but the more the merrier. It's additional discards for our strategy overall. We have a couple Cynthia's Aspiration, which is just helping us draw into large hand sizes, especially important on those opening turns. That's why I like the Pokegears here. They're very flexible cards. They get us towards these Cynthias in those openings after we've suffered a couple knockouts, which hopefully allows us to establish the Cincinos, which then sees us through for the mid-game, where we're able to just boss and mine all the time. The reason why I'm not playing a full 4 copies of Galar Mine is very often you'll be milling some of your opponent's stadiums. So even if they play a full count of stadiums, you will oftentimes still win the stadium war, because we will never discard a Galar Mine unless we want to with Make Do, and we are usually going to be devouring some of our opponent's stadiums, so we can be the one fixing mine in as our last stadium in play very frequently. So yeah, the deck is very streamlined, very straightforward. There's not too much to say here. You just have to be willing to make the most out of your Yellhorns, know when it's best to try and Galar Mine and Boss's Orders certain Pokemon, know the outs, like the switch options that decks are playing, know if they're playing Scoop Up Nets versus like Air Balloons versus Switches and Ropes. All these things are going to be really important to you. Because sometimes you can even put down like floating Manaphy if you just want to, knowing that a deck is likely to play like 1 or 2 copies of Escape Rope. That's a great way for you to not have a Durant get knocked out and it retains an energy in play, that sort of thing. So these are all going to be the most important things to manage with Durant. Just know what switch outs decks are playing, essentially, because that's going to be the best way that you can get some breathing room in these matchups. And yeah, try and buy those turns where you can just devour the game away. And that's really the core strategy here. There are some other options, of course. We could go more aggressive on the energy denial route, where you just have those wiggle room turns because you've, stripped the board of energy, rather than going for a gusting game plan. So combining like a Hammerheads with a Yell Grunt or with a Flannery, with a Fan of Waves, these are all going to be really nice. And Yveltal, actually, with that Cry of Destruction, can be massive into the Mew VMAX matchup. It's a turn where you're not using Devour, which is kind of unadvised, but if they have gone for a Sparkle Attach Meloetta play, you can Cry of Destruction all of those energies away and force the Mew into an awkward position where, again, they have to start fishing through their deck again to hit their next Sparkle. And sometimes that's a lot of cards that they have to draw to be able to get themselves there, which is actually really interesting. Another option, although Galar Mine is an extremely strong card, what you can try and do is play Path of the Peak here and try and use a Path plus Boss strategy against Mew. Hope that because they can't draw cards with their Genesect in some instances, if they don't have Stadium available, you just gain a lot of turns for free, and anytime you gain those turns, you're going to be milling cards off the top of their deck, and just having some breathing room against Mew, which is, of course, probably the most important matchup to win in this format, still in the Brilliant Stars meta. This could be an interesting tech card, although I do think Yveltal could be a more interesting tech that I need to try out that little bit more. Obviously, you don't have quite as good search for the Yveltal because it's not level ballable, so it's not going to be like in hand as much as you would like. But it could easily be a great way to disrupt a Mew player on those opening turns. And then there's just a couple other ways that you can try and build this engine. Barrel would sort of shift you into a different direction again, because level ball isn't very helpful, so you'd end up having some different ball search in here to get Barrel into play. That's the main reason we're currently on a Cinccino engine, actually, is it just makes the ball search that little bit more streamlined. But Barrel is definitely decent for helping you cycle through the deck and gain some additional cards, especially if you are going to cram the deck with some non-draw-based supporters. And Mew could be a sort of lower to the ground option compared to Cinccino, where you get much better outs to hit things like VIP past turn 1, which is really nice, and it can help you hit hammers in the early game, where it's probably most impactful, but it doesn't have that same dig into the deck. I think if you were playing Mysterious Tail Mew, you'd probably increase that gear count as well, and hope that that offsets the draw that little bit, and maybe even add research to the pile, because right now we're really hoping that Cinccino can do a lot of the heavy lifting. I think your opponent is generally incentivized to knock out the Durants turn by turn, because it's better for you to have, like, or it's better for them for you to have Cinccino in play for the most part, because if they gust the Cinccino, you've already got your next turn guaranteed with the full Durant value, whereas if they're knocking out a Durant every turn, they're making you draw the cards with the Cinccino, which is like not dealing with guarantees. So it's actually best for them to just hit through the active every single turn, honestly. You don't mind Cinccino sitting there, they just accumulate value the entire game, so it's not like a big deal. But yeah, if you're sacrificing Cinccino to have Mew instead, research can fill that void for you instead. But yeah, I didn't really want to go over a matchup breakdown down like I normally do with these decks, because realistically, most decks are going to be pressurizing you from like turn 1, if not turn 2, if not turn 1. And the majority of decks in the format will have a number of outs in terms of like switches, ropes, balloons, nets, and physical energy cards. Most archetypes have more than enough to try and see themselves through a game. But there's just the simple win condition that sometimes Devour hits the right targets and stifles them out of their win condition. Most decks are going to be prepared to knock out 690 hit point Pokemon. It shouldn't be difficult for many of them. Sometimes you just get lucky on Crushing Hammer flips. Sometimes the Yellhorn catches them on a bad hand where they're having to research to dig for switch outs. Sometimes they research and whiff these sorts of outs as well at the same time, and you buy those free turns. Sometimes they're flipping tails on the Yellhorns. You know, these things kind of happen. And there's also the sort of panic factor that you have when playing against this deck, where your opponent sometimes goes into or makes bad decisions against Durant because they're much more aware of the clock that's going on and very paranoid of, you know, certain cards where it gets down to that break point where maybe they just lose if a Devour goes wrong. It sometimes can force an opponent to proactively draw like too many cards against you, whereas oftentimes the best strategy, you know, is just going to try and be as conservative as possible while still taking KOs. Durant's going to force them into those awkward positions as much as possible, and that's really the idea. So your matchup spread isn't really anything that you should worry about. You kind of just go into each game thinking, based on your opponent's board state, how can you slow them down the maximum amount of times, and just be aware of what switch outs have been used and what's likely going to be played in each list. Those are really the things that are most important to bear in mind. So yeah, I think in general, Durant will be losing more races than it wins, but I do think that this is a really interesting alternative, and it can be a really nice, fun pick-up and play deck where you're not worried about any deck in the formats particularly. Maybe you're slightly concerned if there's going to be heavy Inteleon quick shooting lists, where sometimes they can take more than one prize in a turn. That could be a little bit awkward. But outside of that, I think generally you just put a clock on most archetypes and hope that you can buy those turns of wiggle room via your trainers. And if they do, you're going to get the job done. Or if somehow, like, your opening Devour just hits a couple switch outs, that's going to be good news for you, right? That's kind of the idea here. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about Durant. Do you think all it was needing was these few extra pieces from Brilliant Stars to make it a valid deck, or do you still think it's going to be kind of that rogue memey deck that's how we know it right now? It's definitely more on the content side than playable, but this could easily just be a pick up and play deck for a lot of people going ahead. Let me know your thoughts. I hope you did enjoy today's video, and I'll be back tomorrow with another Brilliant Stars deck list. Cheers.